Episode 24, Winded City Countdown. Scott Sternal joined by Ben Russo and Matt Eurich. And what a big weekend it was here in Chicago. Just finished up the draft. So that's really exciting. Matt, you did 3 days of work. We're going to talk about that later. And, Ryan Pace has really started to put his stamp on this team and what they're going to do. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs, no matter how much it hurts. And then, of course, we'll round it out with some baseball talk. But we'll get to it here right away. Ben and I did watch the draft together on Thursday, which was fun. Right, Ben? We had fun.
Yeah, it was a good time.
It was a good time. I took the train. Did you guys happen to see my post afterwards on Facebook?
The crazy guy?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The crazy guy. So it was really weird. So for those of you that don't know, Ben and I are in the northwest suburbs, and we went to an establishment called Bulldog Ale House and enjoyed some delicious chicken tenders, and there's some pizza. And I had some mac and cheese bites that were way overrated. But I went to not Sluggers. I went to Casey Moran's the next day, and they had mac and cheese mixed with Gouda bites. And oh my God, they were amazing. And I got like a whole freaking basket of them. Like I got 30 bites up at Casey Moran's for $8. It was quite the deal. And as much as I know
cool story.
As much as everybody loves themselves a good drink deal, a good food deal like that does not show up all the time, and it was.
So that leads us to our top 10 appetizers.
Dude.
Of all time.
I mean, that's not really fair though, because mozzarella sticks is clearly number one.
I don't agree with that.
Why, are you a communist?
No,
Right, come on.
No, we're getting off track.
The Gouda sticks and whatever else.
So anyway,
You're the only weirdo who orders deep fried macaroni and cheese.
Deep fried mac and cheese is my jam. Anyway, so after consuming lots of food with Ben, I left Bulldog and took a walk back to the Roselle stop of the Metro line so I can go back to Elgin. And there was this guy, and he rapped about everything from Joel Osteen to Bernie Sanders to God knows what else. I mean, it was unbelievable. And he just kept doing it, and I just kept standing there with my head down looking at my phone, and I was afraid. I don't know what I was afraid of, but I was afraid that guy was nuts. So, anyways, that's my draft story. Ben and Matt, though, are really going to take you into the draft here. What I contribute is this. I wanted Miles Jack. The Bears did not get Miles Jack, so that's it. Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, it was, overall, I think Matt and I kind of agree that it was a really, really good draft for the Bears. I think Pace had said afterwards that he basically went best player available at every pick, which kind of fits when you really look at what they did, and then even grabbing like 3 safeties there at the end, or 3 guys who could play safety. I think there's a chance a couple of them could play some nickel corner or something like that. But the only pick that I questioned was their first pick. Leonard Floyd, to me, I hope he does good. I have a rooting interest in him being good, but he's got bust potential all over to me. Just because of his, you're going to hear it everywhere. The size, lack of production in college. I think a lot of that's associated with that Georgia team just kind of playing him all over the field. I mean, he played a lot of inside linebacker. Wasn't really asked to rush the passer as much as he needs to, but I fear a guy like him just because the athleticism he has. For those of us who listen to sports radio, Brian Billick, who, man, is he tall?
He's a tall drink of water.
Is he one of the tallest people you've ever met in real life, Ben?
Well, I didn't meet him. I saw him getting off the elevator, and I was drunk, so I started screaming at him, but whatever. Anyway, so Brian Billick's on with Boers and Bernstein. The one thing he says all the time is you run away from size and you run at speed. So a guy like Floyd, to me, you're just going to run right at him. When he's on the field, you're going to audible to whatever it is, have one of your big left tackles put a body on him, and then just run right at him, because even if he gets around that left tackle, he's probably going to end up running past whoever he's supposed to get to. I think it's going to be a problem. I'm hoping we have two really, really good coaches now with Fox and Fangio to coach him up, so I'm hoping that's going to make the difference. But that's really the only pick as far as I can see that I questioned. I think me and Matt kind of agreed with that. So.
Yeah, Matt, I'm gonna toss a question to you here to get you started. While Ben and I were watching the draft, the one thing that became very apparent was this was one draft to us that felt very random. Right? Every pick that came up, so I had my back to Ben to look at the TV that was on the wall, and after every pick, I turned around and looked at Ben, and Ben and I just kept having a quizzical look in our eyes because we couldn't believe the picks that kept coming. And for you, Matt, as you're breaking down the Chicago pick, do you see this as is there a change happening in the NFL in terms of what people are trying to draft, or is this just a weird year and that's what it is? So, loaded question for you, Matt. Go for it.
Yeah, it's tough because, and I made that comment last week before the draft that there were guys that probably from 15 to 50 that could go anywhere in that range. I mean, we saw guys like, Miles Jack, for example. Jack obviously slid because of injury concerns for his knee, but he was once projected to go in the top 2, top 3. Slides all the way to the second round. A guy like Noah Spence, he was supposed to be a top 20 pick. He slides. Reggie Ragland slides. All these different guys were
the guy that Cody Whitehair. I mean,
yeah.
Perfect example. He was projected, I saw him as high as 18.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For the Colts.
And then you saw guys like Ashawn Robinson, Jaron Reed. I mean, it was crazy to see some of these. You saw those guys, quote unquote, fall. Then you see people like Christian Hackenberg go in the second round, or excuse me, or guys like another guy too that I was shocked that fell that far was Mackenzie Alexander, all the way down to the Vikings in the second round. It was a very odd draft. It was something that I think a lot of people thought was possible, that a lot of guys would slip and fall like this, but it was weird. Seeing a guy like Eli Apple go 10 to the Giants, I think they panicked because the Bears moved up.
That was a panic pick.
That one I did not understand whatsoever. I thought that pick was terrible on their part, but it was just weird because I think this draft was so top heavy with two quarterbacks that you're not sure of. Then you had your givens, I think, in guys like Bosa, Elliott, Jalen Ramsey, Ronnie Stanley, DeForest Buckner. Those guys were your givens. And then Laramie Tunsil has this strange, odd video come out, which was so weird, so random for that to happen at that given moment. He falls, and I still think he was probably the best player in this draft. So it was a weird draft. And then the value of guys in the third and fourth round was crazy. You look at the Bears, they got Jonathan Bullard, who was once projected a late first round pick, early second round pick. You look at I'm trying to think of some other guys, but there were a lot of guys that dropped in that third and fourth round, and everybody said that's where the meat of this draft was, in the middle rounds.
So looking at round 2, Miles Jack does end up going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And one thing you guys kept texting about while I was at the game on Friday, the Cubs game that is, was the Jaguars look like they come out of this draft really, really, really ahead of the game. Now, granted, we've heard that before, right? We've heard that from a number of drafts where teams it's they won the draft, and then 3 years later, they're still bad. I don't know that that's the case with Jacksonville, but if you think Miles Jack really is a top 5 talent and he slid because of his knee, then you look at the Jaguars and you're like, man, you know what? Jacksonville walks out of this draft with Jalen Ramsey and Miles Jack, and that's not a bad haul to upgrade their defense going into next season. Am I on pace with where you guys were on Friday?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Or Matt?
Sorry.
I mean, I think the best thing I saw, Matt Miller from Bleacher Report basically said Jaguars got his top 2 players in the draft overall. He had Jalen Ramsey 1, Miles Jack 2. So to be able to do that on top of getting Sheldon Day, if Sheldon Day was 2 inches taller, he's probably he's in that first round conversation. Ton of production. He's just a smaller guy. He's I think he's like 6', 6'1" maybe off the top of my head. But then just coupled with what they did in free agency, they get Dante Fowler coming back, their first round pick from last year who missed the entire season with a torn ACL. Malik Jackson in free agency, Tashawn Gibson in free agency. I mean, that team's no joke defensively. I mean, now it's just a fact of getting them to all play together and understand what they need to do. But yeah, I think Jacksonville, but the Bears, I think, are right there too as far as winning the draft. I mean, everything I've seen like B pluses to A pluses for the Bears draft, with their worst pick really being Leonard Floyd, because Leonard Floyd really seems split, and if anything, I think it leaned more towards more people not liking the pick than liking it. But that was really like your reach, if you will, if you're the Bears. Otherwise, just great value across the board.
Matt, can I ask you, is the worst pick of the draft Roberto Aguayo, kicker, Florida State, going 28 with the 59th overall pick, 28th in the second round? Is that the worst pick of the draft?
Yeah, probably. It's just, I mean, I get it. I don't get it, but
I don't get it either.
I get,
it's not like Connor Barth was bad.
Yeah, I mean, I get the need to have a good kicker. I get that. I don't get the idea. He could have been available 2, 3, 4 rounds later. I mean, let's face it. Other than, I think everybody learned when the Raiders took Janikowski in the first round, how many ever years ago that was. That's kind of just dumb. It just, the value's not there. It's not there whatsoever. You should be able to get much better. And the crazy thing was Tampa needed defensive tackles really, really bad, and they didn't draft one this whole draft. And you mean to tell me there wasn't somebody there when they took Aguayo that could have been better than Aguayo? I mean, and look, you guys know I'm a Florida State guy. I'm wearing a Florida State shirt right now. Like, Aguayo was a hell of a good kicker at Florida State, but guess what? He's a kicker. It's not second round worthy. I think that was a bad move.
The 59th best player in the draft, I mean, is what Tampa Bay is saying there.
Yeah, I mean, he's good, but he's not.
When you consider that the Bears found Robbie Gould doing construction work, and he's the most accurate kicker in the NFL. And granted, I know that's not the norm necessarily, but I mean, you should be able to find a serviceable kicker in.
Did you guys read the tweet that I retweeted about the Aguayo pick?
Was it the comparison to him versus Connor Barth?
Well, and the other notable kicker from the draft.
Yes. I saw that actually.
So
that's what sparked me to ask that question.
People that haven't seen it, the other decent kicker in the draft that actually had a chance of getting drafted, who wasn't, and was an undrafted free agent to the Jets. His name's Ross Martin from Duke. So I'll just read briefly what it says. It says Ross Martin from Duke went 4 for 4 on kicks of 50-plus yards this year. In the last 2 years, has hit 81%, 13 of 16 of kicks 40-plus yards. Robert Aguayo hit 1 of 3 kicks from 50-plus yards this year, and the last 2 years has hit 64%, 14 of 22 on kicks 40-plus yards. Both hit 100% of their extra points, yet Martin went undrafted, and the Buccaneers took Aguayo in the second round after trading up. Ross Martin later signed an undrafted free agent contract with the New York Jets and cost the Jets exactly nothing else.
Yeah.
I think
that does it right there.
And I think just it was name recognition alone with Aguayo, and because he was at a big successful program, and he's been like the golden child since he came into Florida State. It was a big deal when he came, when they recruited him and he signed and all that. So like, I think that's
never have a keeper other than Jake Houghton.
Yeah, because it's always wide right and a couple times wide left, but. Yeah, it's I didn't get it at all. You could find value in kickers. You could go through them, whatever. You'll find a guy on the street that can be serviceable enough.
Do either of you have a favorite late round pick from the draft that you really
for the Bears or just in general?
Any team. Let's go any team. I have one if you guys aren't ready.
I think the
steal
of the draft might be and I think he went in the 5th round, if I'm not mistaken, is Andrew Billings, the defensive tackle from Baylor, going in the 5th round to Cincinnati. I think just situation alone, that guy is going to be really good, a really solid player. I mean, again, we're talking about another guy who I saw projected in the 1st round, slides to the 5th round because they say he can only do one thing, which is stop the run, but man, oh man, did he go to a great situation with Cincinnati. So off the top of my head, without really looking, I would have to say that's up there at least.
Matt, favorite pick for you?
Oddly enough, is Mr. Irrelevant. Kalen Reed, he played at Southern Miss. He's a corner. I had him as like a 4th or 5th round guy. Like, yeah. So it goes to show you should be following along with me for my draft analysis. But yeah, I really like him a lot, and I think Tennessee, that's a big need for them. He's got good size. He's fast. So I was surprised he lasted that long. Everybody was sort of shocked he lasted that long.
My pick of the draft, and Matt, I'm curious if you had this guy on your board, Moritz Boehringer.
He was not on my board.
He was not on your board.
No.
The wide receiver out of Germany. Just really neat that it just goes to show you that the NFL, the global appeal is starting to.
Did you see what happened with that at the draft?
No,
Yeah,
what
right.
happened?
So he actually was on set with NFL Network, and they were asking him, like, oh, how did you learn about football? And he goes, I watched YouTube highlights of Adrian Peterson.
Yeah.
So then they started asking him, like, well, who's your favorite team? He goes, Minnesota Vikings. Then he goes, well, what team showed the most interest in you? And he goes, the Minnesota Vikings. So Mike Mayock, like, stares at the camera and goes, Mike Zimmer. He's like, you need to get this guy. He's tall. He's a good guy. He's got all the measurables that you like. You need to take him with your next pick. And then I guess like right afterwards, Mike Zimmer calls him, and he's like, oh, I heard you were looking for me. And then they went back and forth. And, of course, he was the next pick for the Minnesota Vikings. So it was just kind of a funny thing that happened on set there watching it late on Saturday afternoon. So, they announced the pick. It was some like Minnesota Viking fans, and the NFL Network crew goes nuts because they're basically like, oh, we got this guy drafted. It was pretty funny.
Good stuff there. I just, again, I mean, when for all the shit we talk about Roger Goodell, not so much on the podcast, we will later. He has really been a proponent of making the game more global, right? That you have the NFL, and even though NFL Europe failed, it failed because it was second-rate guys playing there. And I think Goodell has really figured out that if the NFL is going to be a global game, it has to be in global cities, and I don't know that we'll ever see London as a franchise in our life. It's so hard to imagine, but this just goes to show you that Goodell really is onto something here, because to actually have a guy that played football only in Europe and to get drafted in the NFL, I mean that's a big get for the NFL there. At least that's my takeaway from that. So, Matt.
Yes.
Before we move on from the NFL draft, you did coverage for Bleacher Report for 3 weeks or 3 days.
Felt like 3 weeks at some point.
I'm sure it did with all the writing you did there. So I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about what you put into this over the course of those 3 days and the lead up to it, and now the post, and now you're into the post draft here. So go ahead, the floor is yours. Tell us about your experience.
All right. Well, obviously a bunch of mock drafts because people love mock drafts. So did about 2 or 3 of those, did a couple previews, and then the actual day of the draft. So Thursday, that night was updating our draft tracker. So it was nice getting that pick out of the way early, and then worked on another mock draft, which is a little difficult to do when you don't know who's going to be left. So we had a mock draft that night that I did, as well as an updated top 100 big board, which that first night, a little easier to do. I mean, I already had, only 31 picks went off my top 100 big board, so it's just plug in another 30 guys. And then, so the next day, day 2, rounds 2 and 3, same thing, update the draft tracker, work on an updated mock draft. That night was a little tougher doing the top 100 big board, trying to plug in guys and figuring out where they fit, making sure I didn't have duplicates. That one was a little tougher than I thought it would be. And then capped it off on Saturday, same thing, updated the draft tracker, did all that fun stuff. Also had a way too early projected 53-man roster and depth chart, which those are always fun. Got a little sidetracked because of the and Matt Slauson releases, so I had to go back through and change a couple things on those. But yeah, it was a really busy 3 days, fun 3 days. A lot of late nights, capping it off about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, each of those nights. So it was. I'm glad it's over with because it is a lot of work, but it is a lot of fun, and I'm lucky to have that opportunity.
Awesome, and an awesome segue from Matt here. Matt Slauson cut, Antrell Roll cut. I don't think any of us are terribly surprised about the Roll cut. It's fine. You have to make room for some of these new guys coming in, so that's understandable. But Ben, if I'm not mistaken, in the text message, you were really confused by the Matt Slauson cut. Would you like to talk about that some?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say confused. I didn't like the move because I think Slauson over the last 2 or 3 years has been the most consistent Bears offensive lineman. I mean, he's been your anchor at left guard. He filled in pretty well, I thought, at least. I mean, I don't have like the Pro Football Focus numbers or anything like that in front of me to support it, but I thought he did well playing center last year. He's just a versatile guy. I mean, he could have been their left guard or a center. I think there's enough questions with last year's third-round pick, Horonis Grasu, to think, in my opinion, he doesn't look like an NFL center, but maybe he's had a great offseason that I don't know about. But again, I think he could have been there as competition to be your starting center. It's pretty clear they want Whitehair to be their starting left guard, but that still leaves the center position wide open. And I mean, it's not like he had some like $9 or $10 million salary cap hit. It was like $3.5 million. I think they only cleared like 2.5 in cutting him. So, and this wasn't a team that was cap strapped at all. I mean, this was clearly just a move saying we want our young guys to play, we want to build. I kind of mentioned it to you guys. If there's one thing Ryan Pace has made pretty clear, if he's going to end up going down, he's going to go down with his guys. I mean, you look at what he's done to that defensive side of the football. I mean, at this point, what is there, one starter left from before he got here, which is Kyle Fuller?
Kyle Fuller, yeah.
Which is, an inherited first-round pick. So, at that point, my guess is if he had the choice, he wouldn't have Kyle Fuller, but he kind of has to play Kyle Fuller at this point. So,
and based on what he's cut so far, I mean, would it be absolutely unheard of if they break camp this year and they don't think Kyle Fuller's a fit on the roster to say, you know what?
Based off of this team, absolutely, because their cornerbacks are not very good. So,
yeah.
I think Kyle Fuller is your number one cornerback, whether you like it or not. I mean, again, I think he's shown enough. I don't think he's great, but I mean, like I said, it just goes to what I said, where Pace is clearly putting his stamp on this roster. Cutting a leader like Matt Slauson just shows he's like this. He's not playing, or he's not running the kind of system that I want, or the kind of team that I want on the field right now. Matt, you brought it up how they like to pull a lot, and Slauson not necessarily the most athletic guy. He's just kind of like a road grader. He'll block his guy, but he's not really the guy that's going to pull or do any of that other stuff. So kind of it made sense. I didn't necessarily like it, but it made sense.
Matt, any closing thoughts on the Bears before we go on?
Yeah, just real quickly on the Slauson thing, like to echo Ben's points, I don't necessarily like it. I've sort of come around to understanding it a little more because he doesn't really fit in a zone blocking scheme because he's not super athletic. He's more of like he's more of a right guard in like a power running scheme because he is a big, strong, physical guy. But, bringing in two guys like Ted Larson and Manny Ramirez, I mean, yeah, they have flexibility to play center, but I think Slauson showed he had that ability to do that too. So I was a little surprised. I figured, especially with the money he was owed, which wasn't a whole lot, that it wouldn't be that big of a deal to keep him around and leadership, blah, 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 all that stuff. So a little surprised he's gone. Antrell Roll, like you said before, not a surprise there. They added 2 safeties and a potential safety in the draft, so that was pretty inevitable.
All right, so there's your Bears draft coverage for 2016. It was a successful event. It's from all accounts, so go NFL draft. It won't be back here next year is kind of what I'm hearing already.
It's kind of like Philadelphia or LA were the finalists.
You got to imagine it's going to LA. Kroenke's made so many promises about what LA could be. I'd be stunned if LA isn't at the top of the list.
And who the hell wants to go to Philadelphia anyway?
Carson Wentz doesn't, according to one of my inside sources, but we won't talk about who that inside source is on the podcast.
Your 9-year-old student.
No, he's not 9. He's 13.
Okay.
Oh, well. All right, I feel a little bit better about that now.
You should feel better about it. It was the first thing he told me. So, all right, moving
Because
on.
kids don't lie or anything like that. So
It's true.
It was interesting that was what he took away from his conversation with Carson Wentz. All right, moving on. NBA playoffs. So last we left it, if I'm not mistaken, in like a 48-hour period, it went from how the hell are the Golden State Warriors going to get to the NBA Finals to, hey, the LA Clippers, they're on the come here. They're going to really take care of business here to, hey, Chris Paul and Blake Griffin are both out of the playoffs to now the Portland Trailblazers are the team that's going to play Golden State. And Golden State is all of a sudden not that sad about losing Curry for 3 weeks.
Mhm.
And Curry is now talking that he's going to play game 2 or game 3.
Game 3, yeah.
So I don't know what to make of this, but you know, the Spurs look pretty damn awesome.
yeah, that game was insane. Was that yesterday that they won by like 100 points?
Against the Thunder, yeah. The Spurs are like the first team ever to start the postseason 5-0 and win 4 games by 20 or more points.
Yeah, they're averaging
That's
winning by
crazy.
their average winning margin is 24 points right now.
And their smallest margin was 9. They beat Memphis by 9 in one game. It was Memphis's best game, and it wasn't even that good. That Memphis squad was terrible. That's one thing I learned there for sure.
I have basically 2 takeaways from the NBA playoffs here.
Go.
Number one, it's the Warriors or the Spurs, right? Like at this point, still that really hasn't changed. And number 2, how embarrassing it is for the Bulls to have not made the postseason. Like you look at what just happened. I mean, Charlotte Hornets taking the Heat to 7 games. Same thing with
Detroit even getting swept had moments where they looked competitive.
yeah, and
Right,
then
and I'm not saying like the Bulls would have.
the Pacers going to 7 with the Raptors. Like if the Bulls would have beat the Raptors, no doubt in my mind, the Bulls would have won a 7-game series against the Raptors.
Yes, and
The way that
you,
they played.
and you think about that, right? So they beat the Raptors, and then it's 7 games against the Heat, and the Heat probably win that. I'd imagine the Heat win that in 6, but all of a sudden, like, I don't know, it feels like even though they couldn't win the title, like the situation now is just NBA hell.
Yeah.
You know, it is. It's all right. Cool. You have 8 of 1,000 ping pong balls. Congratulations. And yeah, the funny thing is, like Bulls fans are going, well, we won it last time.
But they didn't go from 14 to 1, right? They were like 9.
No, I think it was 13-1. To be honest with you,
They had like a 1.5% chance, I think, the last time.
What was that? The 2009 NBA draft?
I don't remember. Because I think the only time a 14 jumped was Penny Hardaway, right?
Blake Griffin was 09, John Wall 10, Kyrie Irving 11. So that's got to be 2008. God, it was that long ago. Holy cow! Draft lottery. The Bulls they had 17 lottery chances out of 1,000, I think is what it is.
Yeah, so it's like it was like 1.7%.
1.7%, which is just outrageous. 1.7% at the first pick. I mean, unbelievable. Just ridiculous. And it's not going to happen this year. It is not going to happen this year. Whatever. I hate the Bulls. I do. They're a freaking dumpster fire.
We've done so much talking about how bad the Bulls are. It's
How do you like? It's so stupid. I mean, their chances are they have 0.5% chance at the number 1 pick.
Get it done.
That's it right there, right?
Children
there
ping
before,
pong
baby.
balls or whatever it is.
A 98.2% chance of the 14th, and then a 0.7% chance at the third, 0.6 at the second, 0.5 at the first. I'm gonna take this time real quick since we're talking lottery. Have either of you watched any of the this magic moment? The 30 for 30.
I don't even know what that is.
No,
It's
no,
the 30 for 30 with.
the Orlando Magic. I did watch that. Yeah.
And I was
know
just
what it was
watching the
called, so.
lottery, and I'm just going, man, like, this really is. I mean, the drafting of Penny Hardaway there really is Derrick Rose Part 1.
Yeah.
Right? He that
Really
was Derrick
is.
Rose before it was Derrick Rose, and it goes to show you that nothing is guaranteed in the NBA, no matter how. I mean, we're watching it this year with the Warriors, right? I mean, Steph Curry should come back, but I mean, what is he coming back as? How is he going to be, against the Spurs? Is he going to be 100%? Probably not. I mean, if I'm the Warriors and they go up 2-0, I don't know that I'm playing Steph Curry. I really don't. What are you playing him for? You should, even without Steph Curry, you should beat the Warriors in no worse than 6 games.
Trailblazers.
Sorry, the trail. Who did I say?
You said they'd beat the Warriors.
Thank you. It's ridiculous to think and it just goes to show you just how short the shelf life in the NBA can possibly be. You're one slip on the floor away from being Derrick Rose or Penny Hardaway or now Steph Curry, and it just sucks. The Thunder are going to walk out of this decade without winning an NBA title. Kevin Durant's going to walk out of Oklahoma City next year potentially, and they're never going to win a title. And that just seems unbelievable to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, NHL playoffs, blah.
Yeah.
You guys watch any?
We
I've
all,
watched so
we all
little.
stink at picking. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, speaking of which, I have our bracket right here on my computer. We took Dallas over Minnesota, so good for us.
Winner.
Chicago over St. Louis, bad. Anaheim over Nashville, bad. LA Kings over San Jose, bad. And we have Chicago, LA in the conference finals. And the Hawks to the Cup finals. So there you go. And the East side, we had Washington. We had Pittsburgh. We had Tampa Bay, but not Florida. We had
You guys didn't have Florida. I had Florida. Or I had the Islanders. You guys had Florida.
Yeah, we're big Panthers fans.
And now we've got Washington, Tampa for the conference finals, and Washington was the finals. So my thoughts on that haven't changed terribly. I still think Washington probably walks out of the East, although let's take a look at the score. It is currently 3-0 Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh's going to take a 2-1 lead here.
Pittsburgh's dangerous.
Sid the Kid is back.
They feel different this year.
Sid the Kid is back. Hard to watch this, guys? Having a hard time?
No, I just haven't. The Cubs have been on, so.
Yeah, and I've been so draft centric. I've watched so little sports the last 2 weeks, really. I mean, other than watching the Hawks playoff games, a handful of Cubs games, I've watched no NBA playoffs. I've watched no NHL playoffs. So that's why I didn't say anything while you guys were talking about NBA playoffs. I have no idea.
There's nothing to watch in the NBA playoffs, though. That's the thing. The NBA playoffs are just if anybody wanted to argue right now that the NBA playoffs should go down to 8 teams, you wouldn't get an argument from me. Whatever.
Anybody.
Go for it. You want to go to 8 teams? That's fine. Whatever. That's the amount of teams that'll actually have a chance to win the title anyway, so let's do it. And finally, before we sign off, Cubs big week here. It looks like they're going to start off with a bang here against the Pirates. They're up 7-2 in the 9th. They've got Arrieta tomorrow and Leicester on Wednesday. So they're set up for, what could be. I mean, to think, and I know it's early, but they could walk out of Pittsburgh on Wednesday with a 5 or 6 game lead in the division. And it's May 5th.
And so do we start the eulogy for the Cardinals now, or do we want to wait one more week?
Oh, I've already burnt down the house and pissed on the ashes.
Those guys are dead. St. Louis Cardinals are dead.
That team looks awful. Everybody was like, oh, it's no big deal we lost Jason Hayward. Yep, that's right. It's no big deal that you lost potentially your best hitter and your second best pitcher last year. No big deal.
Hey, whatever helps you sleep at night.
And oh, by the way, they both went to your in-division rival. Yeah. But that's not going to matter. You're still going to win 100 games, no problem. I'm so glad. I hope it keeps going, and I know, I know better than to say this about.
No way, Cardinals are dead. I'll say it.
Just you can. I'm not. I hate them, and I'm so
So
glad.
besides the Cubs being good, the Cardinals sucking,
The
you got
Sox
another
are
team
good
on the
still.
South side. Man, they are
The-
just on fire.
Fritz-
Honestly, if you, I watched most of Saturday's game where they were down, and then they came back and then blew it. That was the game right there where I was like, if they lose this, like this is the turning point. This is where like this dream start just collapses. And in a couple of weeks we're talking about like a 500 team, and then you're going to start with the Robin Ventura should be fired and blah blah blah. But they won that game, and like that's a game last year they do not stand a chance winning. I mean, not a chance. That game, if they would have given up the lead the first time, they would have stopped playing. It's just a different feel about them. I mean, and their two biggest hitters, Abreu and Frazier, still really aren't hitting all that well. You got Adam Eaton, who I think, if I read correctly, he's leading Major League Baseball in WAR right now, on top of all the other players right now.
Yeah, his defense is he's got the best outfield defense in the league, or something like that.
It's unbelievable. This guy's done a complete 180. He's continuing the second half of last year's hitting, and then defensively, he's a completely different player in right field. It's insane.
Yeah. So, really loving that ESPN still says the Cavs-Hawks game is going. And that's not true, I'm pretty sure. Awesome job by them. Really,
they're
great.
way behind on baseball too. So
yeah, I know. They say the Oklahoma City-San Antonio game hasn't started yet. Oklahoma looking all right early though. I'm just excited for Billy Donovan to make no coaching adjustments and watch San Antonio run this thing up.
yeah, top 5 important player, Billy Donovan.
He is. He's going to end the career of Kevin Durant. And if you're Kevin Durant, like why the hell would you go back to Oklahoma?
They can give him the most money.
I don't know. Sign a 1-year deal and wait one more year for that cap to just go bonkers. That could be fun.
He'll probably do something like what LeBron did, where he does like the 2-year deal with the 1-year opt-out.
Yeah, and I don't know. I guess everybody talks about like, oh, he get the most money, and I'm not saying like Kevin Durant should leave $30 million on the table, but I also know that at some point, he's signed with Nike or something like that. Nike's gonna pay him $300 million, and could he go to Nike and say, listen, I think my marketing power is greater if I sign in New York, but I'm going to have to leave $30 million on the table to do it. Will you compensate that? I don't know that Nike would flinch at that.
That's a drop in the bucket.
For Nike?
Yeah, he's not going to New York.
No, but that's just what.
But there's
So, all right. So Cubs are good. Sox are good. Everybody's good at baseball in town, so that's fun. The Bears, they had a good draft. The Hawks have a cluster of F coming bad. Oh my God! The more I read about it, the more I'm just depressed about what that looks like next year. Hopefully, Nick Schmaltz is the real deal. So, okay. Closing thoughts. Anything, Matt?
No.
Ben?
Go Bears!
Hey, we're gonna talk about one of the best Bears ever in a little bit here. One of the all-time greats. One that I still, for the life of me, can't figure out why people love him. I literally can't figure it out. And we're going to talk about that on our bottom 10 countdown. Another bottom 10, because why not? Bottom 10 is more fun to talk about than top 10. Be sure to tune in on Wednesday when we have our bottom 10 worst people in sports. It's specific people and just kind of in general. And there'll be a great Matt Eurich story on that podcast, which I am so excited for. So excited for to tell. Ben and I will tell it from our point of view, and then Matt will try to make himself sound better, and then we'll just.
No, I don't need to.
Okay, good. So, anyways, for Ben Russo and Matt. Ben, did you have a closing thought? I'm sorry, I missed that.
I said go Bears.
Oh, that's right. And I said Dicka sucks. Oh, wait, did I say that out loud? I'll say it out loud a bunch of times in our next one. So for Ben Eurich, let's just go with that. For Ben Eurich and Matt Russo, I'm Scott Sternal. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes. Follow on Twitter at Winded City CD. We're on Google Play, so you can find us there. and contact us any way you feel is a good way to contact us with good information. And shout out to the cousin who turned us on to one of the worst movies. We'll touch on that another day. Good night.